Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I figured you all would get bored of 7 videos in a row based on the same things, so I plan on releasing more videos like this whenever I can, just to break the monotony of Switch skill speculation. For everyone who may be new to my channel, welcome. My name is Farin and I'm just a fan of Monster Hunter, who is way too excited about Sunbreak, so I'm just basically spewing out all of my blind ideas and predictions and whatever before we get any substantial information. This video is going to be a bit different than normal speculation, however, since this is more of a suggestion for the game than speculation. But anyways, I need to just stop going on and get started already. If you're watching this video, you're at least slightly familiar with the difficulty issue within the community, specifically about Monster Hunter Rise. Monster Hunter Rise took the basic format of Monster Hunter games and streamlined it, resulting in an easier experience than previous titles, doing things like reducing the amount of materials used to make gear, making village quests significantly easier than hub quests, removing the need to track monsters, and so on. This streamlined nature that Rise had left many people feeling bored with Rise very fast, especially since there isn't really any kind of endgame loop like World or Generations. The purpose of this video isn't to rag on Rise or anything like that, since I think Rise is a phenomenal entry in the series, but it's to talk about one way that Sunbreak can naturally increase the difficulty without leading to situations where the difficulty is artificially inflated to the point it feels more unfair than a challenge. You've already seen the title of this video, so we both know that I'm going to talk about how the monsters chosen for Sunbreak can be used to increase the difficulty in a meaningful way. The main way that the difficulty can be naturally increased is to target something that directly makes the game easier. Much like the difficulty, the Wirebug is a pretty polarizing topic within the community. Regardless of your stance on it, the Wirebug is a very powerful tool for the hunter. It allows them to effortlessly scale walls, quickly recover from attacks, mount and fight as monsters, and many other uses. However, the main issue people see with the Wirebug is that it's too powerful, and makes many of the hunts trivial since you can counter everything with the Wirebug. While there are some attacks that monsters have that require you to use the Wirebug, and even some hunts where you actually have to parkour with the Wirebug, there aren't nearly enough monsters in Rise that have these abilities. So now there's a balancing act that needs to be maintained, where you want a way to make the game more difficult without just bloating numbers, but at the same time make sure it works well as a counter, or even a steroid to the mobility hunters currently have. This is where the monster selection comes in. Sunbreak has the opportunity to pick monsters that naturally either impede the movement of hunters, or require hunters to utilize the extreme mobility of the hunter, since both sides of this coin are something lacking in Rise. So, let's talk about some of the mechanics and monsters that can be introduced in Sunbreak to make the game naturally more difficult. Keep in mind this isn't me speculating about the monsters we could get in Sunbreak, but I'm just talking about examples of monsters and mechanics that could play very well with the Wirebug. The first mechanic I'm going to talk about is Blight, since there's an interesting situation surrounding it. Bleed was introduced in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate as a new Blight from the flagship of that game, Cerrigios. Since then, Blight was also added to Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate along with Cerrigios, but also Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, despite Cerrigios not being in the game. Then, we look at Monster Hunter Rise, which does not have Bleed despite having a monster who did Bleed in the previous game. The complete absence of Bleed in Rise is already a bit weird, but when you look at the 3 confirmed monsters for Sunbreak, it seems like they planned for Bleed to have a major comeback in Sunbreak, since at the very least Malzeno and Shogun have a very strong connection to blood. The reason I bring all of this up is that one of the ways Wirebug movement can be impeded is with Blight, and it kind of seems like that is where Sunbreak is headed. Monster Hunter Rise is no stranger to adapting how Blights work with the Wirebug, since Rise already changed Ice Blight to slow down the cooldown on Wirebugs. In a similar way, Blight could be modified to also affect the Wirebug. The design behind Bleed is simply that, Well, your hunter is bleeding, and exerting themselves causes them to bleed more and lose health. This is represented by a sash appearing over the hunter, with it appearing more frequently the more you exert yourself. The easy fix for this would be simply to make the Wirebug take a significant chunk of your health, but that's not really much of a crutch to the Wirebug since evading attacks and healing is incredibly easy already. Alternatively, Bleed Blight could be modified so that instead of only dealing damage when moving, it also has the ability to literally sever the silk itself. Like I had mentioned earlier, Bleed Blight is represented by a slash that will tick over the hunter periodically, so a system could be implemented that if you use a Wirebug or Silkbind move in between these ticks nothing happens, but if a Wirebug or Silkbind is active while one of the ticks happen, the silk strand breaks and the hunter falls into a vulnerable state. Implementing a system like this would ultimately be more punishing, since hunters falling into a vulnerable state means they're easy targets for the monster, but also the fact that there is a chance that an attack will work would make you more inclined to try one quickly and ultimately get punished or rewarded for risking it. Since we talked about how Bleed Blight can be modified to hinder the mobility of the hunter, let's talk about some monsters. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this isn't me speculating about these monsters being in. Rather, I'm just looking more at the mechanics or playstyle these monsters bring, and how something like that could be beneficial for everyone and not one camp of people. The first monster I want to talk about here is Legiana, mainly because it represents two areas where Rise feels lacking. The first area is with aerial monsters. The Wirebugs and Switch skills greatly expanded Hunter's ability to move, specifically vertically. So to me it just felt like an oversight that we didn't have many aerial monsters, especially because of the strong emphasis that Rise had on traveling vertically. The other area where Rise feels like it's lacking is with ice monsters. Like I mentioned earlier, Ice Blight got a rework so that it slows down the recovery rate for Wirebugs. So it seems like another oversight that we only have 4 ice monsters in Rise, and all 4 of them are ones where it's pretty easy to avoid Ice Blight from. Legiana is a monster that fills the void with both of these categories, since Legiana is not only a very aerial monster, but also because its fighting style makes it very difficult to avoid getting Ice Blight against. Legiana leaves ice trails along the ground and in its attacks, so even if you have a shielded weapon, Legiana can hold complete control of your positioning, something that we don't have much of with the Wirebug. I'm going to start off this section by saying I'm kind of disappointed in Almudrun, and I don't think I'm alone here. Almost everything about Almudrun is super cool, from the armor and weapon designs, to the color scheme and body build, and even his ability to control mud, but his fight just seems lackluster, like it's not on the same level as every other aspect of him. I don't know if other people have this same view or something, but before Rise released, and we were seeing gameplay clips, I remember just seeing all of the ones for Almudrun and imagined that his tail was like a giant paintbrush that allowed him to literally paint the world however he wanted. I loved that idea, and I thought his fight would reflect that idea, with Almudrun creating walls to block the approach of hunters, or creating holes that the hunters could fall into, just really utilizing this mud manipulation ability. However, Almudrun in Rose just feels awkward. Most of the hunt is either Almudrun in the pose where he's half in the mud with his tail sticking up, or he's doing the wide sweep with his tail that created a tiny wave of mud. Now, the point of my bringing up Almudrun isn't to just complain or something like that, but it's to show the potential that Almudrun has to be a mobility limiter for the hunters. Almudrun literally has the ability to create walls and barriers that require the hunter to navigate around, but his hunt really doesn't use his full potential. For example, Almudrun has the ability to create a giant mud ball, but only uses it to perform the same tail sweep he always does. What if Almudrun simply threw the ball at hunters, and let it linger for a bit bouncing against walls? Another example is that Almudrun can create pillars that put distance between him and hunters, but why doesn't Almudrun make spikes that hurt the finger if they stand on it? Almudrun has the potential to be the monster that can be the most effective at limiting, or even punishing hunters' movement, but he just doesn't reach the potential that he could achieve. The last monster I am going to talk about today is Malfestio, which is one I talked about a lot before in a previous video, so I'm not going to spend too long on them. Like I mentioned in that video, Malfestio has the unique ability to inflict a blight called Confusion, which causes the player's directional inputs to be reversed. Something like this is definitely needed in Sunbreak, since the Wirebug requires precise inputs, especially with moves like Wirefall that can harshly punish a bad Wirefall. Confusion would have the ability to make you hesitant to use certain movements and silkbind moves, since it can mess with your accuracy and result in ways the monster counter the hunter. There's also other blights that reduce limits that for some reason have been removed in 5th gen, like Snowman Blight and Caked. While those blights aren't ones Malfestio can inflict, I do find it weird that 5th gen seemed to remove a lot of mobility hindering blights, so Sunbreak should definitely come back with strong ones like Confusion, or even new blights that have the ability to mess with how the hunter moves, whether it's just with the inputs, or even a visual thing like Blinding Hunters puts a harsh vignette on the screen. As you can see from these examples, Sunbreak has lots of opportunities to be able to naturally increase the amount of difficulty in the game, without resorting to just bloating numbers. Anyways, this video is definitely longer than I had originally planned, so I really hope you enjoyed this. If you did, supporting my channel in any way is greatly appreciated, and who knows, maybe pressing like or subscribe will cause a cookie to fall from the sky. I mean, it probably won't, but you won't know unless you try it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.